Hi guys, so since before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the response from the West was first diplomacy. French President Macron was on the phone on a regular basis attempting to convince Putin to pull his forces back. That failed. The Russians invaded. The next step was to impose sanctions and continue the reinforcement of the Ukrainian military. Russian multimillionaires and billionaires have been targeted. Assets belonging to Putin and his family have been seized and sanctioned. What is the alternative to this? Military action, obviously. Well, Mick Wallace, an Irish MEP, had this to say over the idea of imposing more sanctions on Putin's Russia.
Mr. President, in his excellent book, The Economic Weapon, The Rise of Sanctions as a Tool of Modern War, Nicholas Mulder explains how economic sanctions, though meant to function as an alternative to war, are modelled on devastating techniques of warfare. Sanctions are a form of war, and often the consequences are shocking. 500,000 children died in Iraq because of sanctions. 40,000 people died in Venezuela in recent years because of illegal US sanctions. Tens of thousands have died in Syria because of US and European sanctions. What are the sanctions that the EU have on Russia going to do? Most sanctions are illegal unless mandated by the UN. Are our sanctions on Russia going to stop the war? We don't think so. Are they designed to undermine the Russian economy? Sure. But will the boys in the Kremlin suffer? I doubt it. Will the ordinary Russian people suffer? Absolutely. Have we any idea of the devastation that we may cause to women, children and the elderly and the less well off in Russia with sanctions that are not stopping the war? What are we doing?
Okay. What is the alternative, Mick? Because you're against sanctions. So the alternative is what? Military action. But Mick does not support military action. So he's also, it seems, against providing the Ukrainian military with the equipment they need. Now, I don't know if he has changed his tune on that, but at the beginning of this crisis, he was talking about, no, why we shouldn't be supporting Ukraine because that's poking the bear in a sense. Not his words, but in a sense, that's what he was alluding to. So we're actually, before the invasion, people like himself were saying, no, we shouldn't be supporting Ukraine because that's going to upset Russia and it's going to increase the chance of war. Well, that didn't make any difference. We know that Putin had planned to do this invasion anyway. So what is the alternative? So you don't want to impose sanctions on Russia. You don't want to impose sanctions on Putin's regime. You don't want to go to war. You don't support military action. What is the alternative? Now, he mentioned the United Nations here, but there are two problems with that. First of all, the United Nations is extremely weak when it comes to dealing with these issues, and it takes time. But the other problem is that any action, or pretty much any action, can be probably vetoed by Russia because they have the power of veto. So whatever you do, or there are other countries, of course, that are pro-Russian that would support fighting against any sort of military action, would support Russia there. So you're against sanctions. You probably realize that the UN is toothless. You're against military action. You're against, it seems, providing military equipment to Ukraine. So what is the alternative here? And also notice how Mick was rightly so pointing out the damage that sanctions has done to different countries around the world, how many people have died because of those sanctions. But he never mentioned once here the people of Ukraine. The victims here. They did not invade Russia. Russia invaded Ukraine. There are images, and I'm not going to post these images, but you can find them yourself online. But there are images, horrible images coming out of mass graves, of people being slaughtered in the streets by the Russian military. And Mick has nothing to say about that. You're concerned about, it seems you're more concerned about ordinary people in Russia than you are real victims in Ukraine. Now, is it possible for the people of Russia to overthrow their leader? I don't know. I don't think so. I think it needs to happen further up the chain of command. The people of Russia have been force-fed a diet of propaganda for 2 decades now that Putin is the dear leader. So it's difficult to overturn that. But there are people towards the top who understand exactly what's going on. And they are in a position to remove him. Oh, yes, they can. They know they could do it tomorrow. But they benefit from the regime being maintained. So isn't it a sad or is a bit depressing that Mick is here criticizing the European Union, criticizing the West for imposing sanctions on Russia, and he has nothing to say about the victims, the real people, the real victims here in Ukraine? He's against military action. He's against sanctions. What is he actually for? What is your alternative to all of this, Mick? I'd love to know it. I'd love to hear it. Because all I hear is what you're against, not what you're for. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think about all of this. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.